For a sweet, spicy, spirit-forward sipper of a cocktail, you need to try this one right here. This is a Sidney or a St. Moritz cocktail. Let me show you how to make it. Welcome back to the channel. I'm Matt, I'm the Whiskey Nerd, and like I said, today I'm making a sweet, spicy, spirit-forward sipper of a cocktail. I'm making a Sidney or a St. Moritz cocktail because this cocktail has two names. If you look it up, you will see a Sidney/St. Moritz cocktail because apparently this cocktail came from the St. Moritz hotel. In the 1948 cocktail book, The Fine Art of Making Drinks by David A. Embry, he lists this cocktail as a cocktail served at the St. Moritz Hotel, but apparently the original version of it comes from the 1930s from a cocktail book called Cocktails by Jimmy, late of Ciro's, and it's apparently from London, and it's an interesting little cocktail. I won't really get into the history of it because we're here today to make the cocktail, but it is a nice little cocktail that's been around for a long time. It's essentially a 3-2-1 cocktail. So you got three parts of your rye whiskey. Right here I've got the Town Branch rye whiskey. Comes in at 100 proof, so it's 50% alcohol by volume, lots of flavour. I reviewed this earlier on this week. I'll put a link to that review up there. I'll put a link down below. It's a solid little rye whiskey. It's nice, full of flavour. It's not the best rye in the world. It's not the worst rye in the world. It's one that I think would go well in cocktails, and I wouldn't feel guilty using cocktails because it's got a great little rye spicy profile without being really overpowering, so it will let the other ingredients shine. Speaking of those other ingredients, we've got yellow chartreuse. Now, yellow chartreuse is getting a bit hard to find. I mean, the recipes online, they say that you can use yellow chartreuse or you can use this here. This is Genepi des Alpes. It's a French herbal liqueur from the Alps. I actually did a little comparison of these two, a little taste of these two. They taste very, very similar. If you taste them back to back, you can tell which one is different because the chartreuse, it's a little bit sweeter, it's a little bit more syrupy, but ultimately they're very, very similar. So if you can't find yellow chartreuse, Genepi, which is more widely available, I think these days, is a very good substitute. But since the original called for yellow chartreuse, and I've got yellow chartreuse, I'll be using yellow chartreuse. But like I said, it's very, very similar profile, and like the little bit of syrupy texture to that, when you mix it, when you have it in the cocktail with the other ingredients, you probably wouldn't be able to tell the difference. And the last ingredient is dry vermouth. This is Martini Rosso's extra dry vermouth. You can use like a semi-dry, you could use like a Bianco vermouth if you wanted something a little bit sweeter. But for me, I think the kind of almost spicy, dry, bitter, spirit-forward nature of this cocktail works very well. And because it's got such a simple list of ingredients, I think that's enough time talking. The next time we make it. So we're gonna get our mixing glass and we're gonna pop a nice rock of ice in there before we measure out our ingredients. Starting off with our Town Branch rye whiskey. Like I said, it's 3-2-1. So we're gonna go in with 45 ml, 30 ml, and 15 ml of our other ingredients. So I'm gonna go in here with 1.5 ounces or 45 ml of my Town Branch rye, which like I said is just a solid little rye. Very, very tasty with a nice little profile to it. Then is our yellow chartreuse. We're gonna go in with 30 ml or 1 ounce of it. It is very nice. Chartreuse is one of those ingredients that I think if you aren't really familiar with it, you might think it's very strong. Like it does have a lot of herbal ingredients, herbal notes to it, but when you mix it with other ingredients, when you mix it with a whiskey, that herbal note works, especially with a rye, which is quite nice and spicy. But then you get this sweetness, you get that syrupy nature that comes through and adds a lot of flavour, I think, to the cocktail. And lastly, we're going to go in with our extra dry vermouth, which again, slightly herbal, slightly sweet, but more on that dry side. So we're going to go in with only 15 ml or half an ounce of our extra dry martini vermouth. And then we're just going to stir it away for about 30 seconds just to get it nice and cold. Okay, I think that is nicely chilled now. So I'm going to get ready to strain it out. What we're going to do is we're going to strain it up into a nice old-fashioned glass, and we're going to pop it onto another fresh rock of ice. So we're going to get a little hawthorn strainer up top, catch that ice there that's starting to melt, and pour it over this nice, fresh rock of ice. Now, in the kind of listing, the kind of history for this cocktail, they say that you can garnish it with an olive or a cherry. I personally don't really like olives. I think they're a little salty. I don't think they have any place in cocktails, so I'm going to use a little Luxardo maraschino cherry, because for me, they add a nice bit of flavor without overpowering. That little bit of like the marasca sugar syrup, it's going to add a little bit of extra sweetness. It's got a little bit of like extra dimension to the cocktail without taking away from it. And that right there is how I make a Sidney or a St. Moritz cocktail. Now real quick, before I taste this cocktail, if you're new here, scroll down, hit that thumbs up button, hit that subscribe button. I put out whiskey reviews like the review of that Town Branch Rye Whiskey every Wednesday, and I put out cocktail recipes every Friday like this featuring whiskey. So if you want to see more, make sure you hit subscribe and let me know in the comments below what kind of cocktails you want to see me make in future. But now let's taste this one. Yeah, that is really nice. Like, I'm glad I went in with a rye whiskey that was slightly higher proof. Like if I went in with something that was 40%, even 45%, I don't think it would stand up well, because that yellow chartreuse, you get this syrupy, sweet, herbal note that works with the rye whiskey because it's pushing in the same direction. The rye whiskey is slightly herbal, it is slightly sweet, but because it's at a higher ABV, you get that spicy note coming through. You get the oak spice, you get like the kind of the baking spices, a bit of cinnamon, a bit of nutmeg coming through as well. The the Dry Vermouth adds a bit of like a tempering nature because it's a little bit herbal, it's a little bit sweet, but I think it's a little bit dry, so it keeps it from being too sugary, keeps it from being too sweet. It's definitely like a sipper of a cocktail, definitely one you would have on that rock of ice to like let it sip, let it sit, let it savor. Enjoy this cocktail slowly rather than being something you'd pound back and then go looking for another one, because every ingredient here is alcoholic. This here is 50% alcohol, this here is 43% alcohol, and this here is 15% alcohol. So it's definitely one that you would sip like as a nightcap at the end of a meal, maybe in place of a dessert, because it is kind of sweet, but it is also nice and rounded off. So I think I'm going to keep on enjoying it, and I'll see you next time. Sláinte.